Welcome back to Morpher. This is my mobile platformer devlog series. Now that I actually kind of have an upload schedule, subscribing really helps me out, liking the video, do stuff for the algorithm. But without further ado, let's get into it. Since last time, I've completely upheaved my morph mechanic by making one simple change to it. In doing this, I've completely re-emphasized morphing, and I think it's had some really cool effects so far. With this, I've added some more visual cues and changes to tapping and morphing in general, and then I just added some minor technical changes. I made the screen fit multiple aspect ratios, and I adjusted swiping on the sector select screens. So, getting into it more, the change that I made to morphing was simply reversing what tapping does. Originally, I talked about how I wanted tapping the screen to be akin to tapping a button on a controller. And while this does make sense in terms of emulating jumping and a traditional platformer, the key with my game is morphing, not necessarily jumping. The steps that I have taken previously to make jumping feel better to play are definitely good. However, the changes that this now brings are huge. I wanted to distinguish the rolling and jumping modes specifically in terms of engaging enemies. For a while now, I've wanted enemies to be only destructible while the player is in the rolling mode. Diegetically, this is because the rolling mode has spikes on it and the jumping mode doesn't. However, I haven't actually telegraphed this to the player. I have added enemy ID tags, which circle around the enemy and any sort of destructibles to draw the player's attention to it, as a target almost. However, they are both present during the jumping mode and the rolling mode. This sends conflicting messages to the player. So, when the player taps now, which is an active engagement with the mechanics, rather than passively releasing a tap, the enemy ID tags pop up on screen. Furthermore, I added sort of this ripple effect and this outward increasing radar scan. Again, diegetically, this is more just kind of unifying the themes of the game in that this is some sort of robot and the rolling mode just happens to be equipped to deal with enemies. This feels really good to use. It's extraordinarily fun to play with, but the previous changes that I made to the way that the player jumps feels very systematic if you want to perform one of these special jumps. Sort of akin to Mario triple jumps, backward jumps, and the such. For instance, I added a specific coyote time jump where if you jump after running off of a ledge, the player has a slightly lower but longer jump. Now, actively engaging with the coyote jump is actually a lot easier, and it feels much more pronounced, in my opinion. Either way, it makes it a lot more fun to play and jump with, so that's a bonus. Moving on to the aspect ratio system, I just calculate the screen width divided by the screen height, find the aspect ratio of the resolution, and then discretely categorize that as either 16 by 9 or bigger than 16 by 9 or less than 16 by 9. The screen that you're currently seeing is my S10 Android phone, which has a 19 by 9 aspect ratio, and then I just sort of optimized for any sort of 16 by 10 or smaller devices. I haven't gone smaller than 16 by 10, so iPad devices, for instance, won't quite work, but that's something that I'm going to push further into the future because those will require a little more UI changes than either of these additions did. There was one minor addition that I had to make to the starting building to each level because originally the side on the left here was not visible during the game, and now during 19 by 9, because the camera extends in the width, I had to add some extra visual elements there, which was pretty easy. I actually like how it looks now, so that's pretty cool. In general, I've noticed that the effect that this has had is the game seems more cinematic playing it on my phone instead of having these giant black bars running up the sides. And then very minorly, I just adjusted the swiping on the select menu. I made it a lot more fluid, so beforehand the player could accidentally swipe through multiple sectors at once, and swiping part of the way on a sector would just result in swiping back to the sector and so I wanted to make it a lot more easy to just kind of flip back and forth between the sectors. In all, it's been kind of rough to work on this. I've been working on school on the side and doing this project when I have time, which hasn't been very often. I have found that some of the ways that help me keep track is to first off write down the project that I'm currently working on, be it making the jumping feel more consistent or just making everything more optimized. Adding the aspect ratio thing has been on my list for a while now, and then taking those big projects that I don't want to work on and breaking them down into smaller projects. Once you have a checklist, if nothing on that checklist is something that you want to work on, break each of those down into further subcategories until you find at least one thing that you want to work on. You don't want these projects to end up being something that you have to do. You want to find ways to make it something that you want to do. For the most part, that's what I've been up to. I have some other things in mind, but for the most part, I just really want to get this game to feel good, and it's starting to reach a place where it actually feels extraordinarily fun to play, which is not something that I can actually say has been true throughout the development of this. And so now that all of these years of work are paying off, it feels kind of good. I've got some big plans, but I want to take things slow and systematically start tackling these tasks that I have ahead of me, but I'm definitely looking forward to it. And as always, doing a little bit every single day really helps. So, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.